get ready because today we are going way back to basics like English 101 stuff. We're going to be talking about daily routines.
Daily routines.
But not just like the wake up, eat, work, sleep, but like how do we express those routines in English, which can be surprisingly tricky.
You know, it's interesting because even something as simple as like describing your morning can actually tell us a lot about the structure and the little nuances of the English language. We'll see how verbs can like shift and change and how time just kind of sneaks into our sentences and even like little cultural quirks that pop up even in basic phrases.
Yeah, true. And the source material we're looking at is an English lesson for beginners. But trust me, there are some real golden nuggets in here, even for fluent speakers.
Oh, yeah.
So to start out, let's look at these two verbs that often trip people up. Wake up versus get up. And the lesson points out a distinction that I hadn't really thought about before.
It is a subtle difference, but it shows how English a lot of times uses multiple words to talk about just one action. And it kind of adds layers of meaning. So wake up is that internal moment when you become conscious, you know, like coming out of sleep.
Yeah.
But get up, that means you're physically moving, you're leaving the bed.
So wake up happens in your head.
Yeah.
Get up is what your body does. Got it.
Exactly.
And since we're talking about getting the day going, next up is eat breakfast. Now, I know that breakfast is important.
Of course.
But this lesson emphasizes it in a way that makes me think about the structure of the sentence itself.
Yeah. Eat breakfast. It's not just about the food. It's a classic subject, verb, object sentence. It's like the backbone of English grammar.
Oh, wow.
You, the subject, perform the verb eat on the object breakfast. Simple, but really important.
Okay, so I'm seeing how even these basic phrases are like little mini grammar lessons.
Right.
Now, things get a little more complicated with go to work or go to school.
Okay.
I mean, they both use go, but the implications are totally different.
Yeah, what's interesting there is it's how those phrases reflect like roles in society. So go to work means you're entering the professional world.
Okay.
You're contributing to the economy.
Right.
But go to school, that's all about learning.
Yeah.
It's about preparing for the future.
Yeah.
So it's like two paths that kind of branch out from the same starting point.
It's true. It's not just vocabulary. It's like we're getting a glimpse into how English reflects different stages of life.
Yeah, it is.
And let's not forget the fuel that keeps us going.
Yeah.
Have lunch. It's interesting how this choice of verb is different from eat.
Have, in this context, it means more than just eating food. It implies that you're taking a break.
Right.
Like you're having a social kind of ritual.
Right.
Almost like have elevates lunch to something more significant than just eating breakfast.
Wow, I never realized how much nuance was packed into that one little verb.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these 5 essential actions. Wake up, get up, eat breakfast, go to work or go to school, and have lunch. They seem basic, but I'm realizing now they're like a crash course in, like you said, English structure and even cultural values.
Yeah, and notice too how like the vocabulary itself, like it suggests a timeline, a sequence. It's not just random words. It's the story of a typical day as it unfolds step by step.
So even before we get to full sentences, the building blocks themselves are already telling a story. This is way more interesting than I thought this would be.
Yeah.
All right. So are we ready to move on to some actual phrases that use these verbs?
Let's do it. Let's see how these actions come to life in more complex expressions.
Okay.
And how that reveals even more about English grammar and idioms. So we were talking about how, you know, these simple actions really unlock a deeper understanding of English sentence structure.
Oh, yeah. It's like those verbs are like the foundation.
Exactly.
Now we're going to like build whole sentences on top of them.
Exactly.
Using these phrases from this beginner's lesson.
I love it.
It's kind of like, you know, those construction toys where you just like snap pieces together.
That's a great analogy. And as we add more pieces, more words and phrases, those sentences become richer and more complex.
Yeah.
Take the phrase, I brush my teeth, for instance. It introduces a new element, that possessive pronoun my. It shows how English expresses ownership.
Oh, right. So it's not just brushing any teeth. It's specifically my teeth. I'm seeing how all these little details just add up to this bigger picture of how English actually works.
Right.
And speaking of details, the next phrase, take a shower, brings up something kind of interesting.
It does. Take a shower is interesting because it uses take in a way that might not be obvious to someone new to English. We don't really take a shower like we're carrying it away.
Right.
But the verb implies that we're engaging in the activity of showering.
Ah, so it's more about the action itself, like take a walk or take a nap. English verbs are tricky.
They can be.
Okay, now we get to some phrases that really signal the start and end of the workday or the school day. Start work, start school, finish work, finish school. There's a lot packed into those.
Definitely. Not only do they introduce the idea of time,
Right.
but they also highlight how important work and education are in our daily lives.
Absolutely.
And the structure is so simple, subject plus verb plus object.
Yeah.
It's like a blueprint for so many other sentences.
Yeah, I'm realizing that learning these routine phrases isn't just about memorizing words. It's
Yeah.
about cracking the code of how English sentences are actually built.
It is.
It's like this secret language. That suddenly makes sense. And then after all of that hard work, we have the much anticipated phrase, go home.
Ah, yes. That one is simple, but it says so much about wanting comfort and belonging.
Yeah.
Home isn't just a place. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
It's a refuge.
Yeah.
And go suggests a very deliberate action, a conscious choice to return to that safe haven.
It's like all the stress just melts away.
Oh, yeah.
As we go home, I'm feeling relaxed just thinking about it. So we've got all these phrases that build on those verbs we were talking about earlier. And it's amazing how they not only paint this picture of a typical day, but they also reveal so much about how English works on a deeper level. But this whole deep dive, it's not just for people learning English, right?
No, not at all. I mean, for fluent speakers, this is like a chance to really appreciate the intricacies of our own language. We often take these everyday words and phrases for granted,
Right.
but when we actually break them down, we realize how much thought and structure they contain.
Yeah, it's like one of those optical illusions where you see one image and then suddenly your brain flips it and you see something totally different. That's what this is doing for me, but with English. And speaking of seeing things differently, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, technology.
You're right. The beginner's lesson that we're looking at doesn't specifically mention it, but we can't really ignore how technology has changed our daily routines.
For sure.
Remember those simple verbs we started with, like wake up and get up?
Yeah.
Well, how many of us wake up and immediately reach for our phones?
Uh-oh, yeah. I'm totally guilty of that. It's like my phone is bit at my hand or something. But that actually brings up a really interesting point. How has this constant connection changed our daily routines? Is all bad?
That's a great question, and it's something we should definitely explore more. While technology has made our lives easier and more efficient, it's also blurred the lines between work time and free time. It's like we're always on.
Right, like checking emails during dinner.
Yeah.
Or scrolling through social media in bed.
Exactly.
Like we've forgotten how to switch off.
Exactly. And that's where things get a little dangerous. When technology controls everything we do, we risk our mental and physical well-being. So instead of just mindlessly scrolling, maybe we should make time for activities where we don't use tech.
Right. So instead of starting the day by checking social media, maybe we should start by taking a few deep breaths. We're stretching. It's about being in control of our routines, not letting our devices control us.
You got it. It's about that balance. We want to use the power of technology, but we also want to protect our peace of mind. It's hard, but it's really important.
It is. And this leads us to another fascinating part of daily routines. Cultural differences.
Yeah.
While this beginner English lesson is focused on common English phrases, it doesn't really address how those routines might be different around the world.
That's a really important point. What might be considered a normal routine in one culture might be totally strange in another.
Yeah.
For example, think about the idea of a siesta. It's a midday break that's common in many Mediterranean and Latin American countries.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. It's not just a quick nap, is it? It's like a whole cultural thing. A time to rest, be with family, and just recharge. Exactly. It's a great example of how a culture's values are reflected in their routines. And then you've got all those differences in meal times, the social things we do around food, even the order in which people do their daily tasks.
It's like we're all playing the same game of life, but with slightly different rules.
That's a great way to put it. And that's what makes it so interesting. By understanding those differences, we gain a deeper appreciation for the diversity of human experience and all the different ways people live their lives.
So it's not just about learning English. It's about learning about the world, about different cultures. It's even about learning about ourselves. Wow, this deep dive has really taken us on a journey. We've gone from the building blocks of English sentences to cultural siestas and how technology is affecting us.
Right. It's amazing how much we can learn from something as simple as describing our day.
Yeah.
But that's the power of language. It's a window into our thoughts, our cultures, and who we are as humans.
Absolutely. And so as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive, I'm wondering, how can we take all of this and apply it to our own lives? I mean, we've analyzed these routines, but what does that really mean for us practically?
That's an awesome question, and it's one that we'll definitely dive into in the final part of our exploration. We've set the stage. Now it's time to connect everything and see how understanding our daily routines can actually empower us to live more intentionally and with more purpose.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about basic English verbs, and then we went all the way to like cultural siestas and balancing tech in our lives. But now I'm thinking, how can we actually use all of this, like this new understanding we have about routines, to actually improve our own lives?
Right. Like, how do we put all of this into practice?
Yeah.
We've looked at the language, we've explored the different ways people do things around the world. But the real change happens when we take that knowledge and use it to look at our own habits.
So it's not just about speaking English better.
Not just that.
It's about like living better overall.
Yeah, think of this simple English lesson as like a secret self-help guide.
Uh-huh.
By breaking these routines down into their most basic parts, we can look at our own days in a new way. Are we letting our phones take over our mornings?
Right.
Are we giving ourselves enough downtime? Are there things, cultural practices maybe, that we could try to add more joy or even make our lives more efficient?
I'm already rethinking my morning scroll session. But how do we go from thinking about it to actually doing something? It's easy to say, be more mindful,
It is.
but it's hard to change your habits.
It is hard, but that's where the power of language comes in.
Right.
Remember how those basic verbs and phrases showed us a timeline?
Yeah.
Like a sequence of events? We can use that same idea to change our routines.
Oh, okay. So like instead of wake up, grab phone, it becomes wake up, stretch, and then maybe a quick look at messages.
That's it. By choosing the verbs and phrases we want to use to describe our ideal day, we're basically training our minds to follow that pattern.
Mhm.
It's like writing a new story for ourselves, one little action at a time.
So we don't have to make these huge changes.
Right.
It's more about tweaking the language we use to describe our routines, which then changes our actions.
Exactly.
I like that. It feels less overwhelming.
And remember, words are powerful, but they work best when we use them with intention. Ask yourself, what do I really want my day to be like?
Right.
What little things can I change that would help me get closer to that vision? Maybe it's trading 15 minutes of social media for a walk outside. Or maybe it's swapping that sugary afternoon snack for something healthy and doing some stretching.
Those are really good examples, and I think that's a big takeaway from our deep dive today. It's not about having this perfect Instagram-worthy routine. It's more about understanding that our habits are choices we make, and that we can always change those choices.
For sure. Whether you're learning English so you can connect with people from other cultures or you're just trying to have a happier life, I think this look at routines shows us that even small changes can make a difference.
I feel like there are so many possibilities now. It's like our daily routines are these blank canvases, and we get to decide what our masterpiece will look like. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure. And remember, even the smallest brush strokes can create something beautiful.